Welcome to the Service Provider Podcast, where you get to hear mindful and soulful discussions surrounding guests' lived experiences, professional development, and impact of their culture and identity as they navigate daily life and things that just happen. I am your host, Frederick Marte, and before we get started, I just want to let you know that everything discussed here are of our own thoughts, beliefs, and ideas, and they are not affiliated with any employer or partnership we may be involved with. Keep in mind that this is not meant to be taken as therapeutic advice or an alternative to mental health treatment. Our first guest for the Service Provider Podcast Season 1 is Quincy Cain. He is a Black queer artist and performer born in East Meadows, New York, and raised in Paterson, New Jersey. He has performed in shows such as Taming of the Shrew and Man of La Mancha, as well as other various improv acts. His career as an actor began at age 12 in his first production of Oliver, when he was first introduced to show choir. He discovered a new love for the storytelling element introduced by writers such as Stephen Sondheim and Howard Ashman. All of this culminating in a modus operandi steered by and geared towards youth and peers alike who have been misjudged and misplaced. Through lyric writing and poetry, he expresses the turmoil and triumph of his life experiences. His aspiration is to curate spaces that allow others to release common exasperations through forums, stage readings, concert halls, and black boxes. Help me welcome Quincy, an old friend from high school. Welcome, Quincy. How are you?
Hey, Fred. I'm good. How you doing?
I'm good. It's a bit cold, but I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm good. It's cold down here in Georgia as well. Such a drastic change because I feel like just last week it was like as hot as it can be, and then overnight just, and yeah, it's chilly. It's chilly. I'm getting by.
Okay. So tell me, what are you doing in Georgia?
I'm actually here with my family. Coming from Jersey. I've actually been here for a minute now. It's been like 3 years, probably 3 years. It's been, and I've really just been trying to survive. I mean, outside of the whole transition from Jersey, it was different getting to know or reacquaint myself with the ways of like Atlanta or just the South in general. It's such a different type of just a different type of culture shock that goes along with that transition. So I feel like just getting myself acquainted with that outside of just working myself to death and monotony, you have to have hobbies to sustain yourself. So just getting myself back out there is a whole different type of thing. But, I've been working, supporting my family the best way I can. And yeah, that's about it. I've gone to a couple concerts out here with my friends because unfortunately I have like the best friends. God has really blessed me. I really am fortunate to have friends that even from Jersey have made their way to Atlanta and have taken me out to certain things such as Pride, going to multiple concert venues. So I'm still staying connected with my side of theater and the arts in general, just in a new way here in Atlanta. So yeah, that's really where my trajectory has taken me since I've landed here.
Okay, so you mentioned a lot of things, and that's great. So let's pivot and go back. So tell us a little bit about Jersey, growing up in Jersey.
Well, I actually came to Jersey from Georgia, strange enough, and that transition kind of developed me. Like I got all my development, all of my true rooting in the world from Jersey, discovering different cultures that I would have never been exposed to being in the South, my Dominican brothers and sisters, my Peruvian brothers and sisters, Bengali brothers and sisters, all the different culture that I was exposed to at such a young age that kind of allowed me to, I don't want to say become a chameleon, but sort of, invest myself in different cultures other than my own, or just other than something that I wasn't really connected to because I didn't know much of it. So it was something for me to begin to connect with and resonate with. Like, it gave me a sense of belonging being in Jersey. So I think a lot of the time growing up in Jersey too, I had to kind of, I don't want to say keep my head down, but it was a new way of establishing myself. And I didn't have as much freedom as I did before to really express myself in a way that was like safe, because it was like, the North, it's very much, just, it's a different type of bravado that goes along with that. So I think coming from that, the Southern way of living and the hospitality of it all, it's a different type of, it was a different type of way. But going from that to my high school experience, because I just came to Jersey from Georgia in seventh grade. And then eighth grade, I went to eighth grade, first year in Jersey. And then as I transitioned into high school, that's really when I got my core friend group. I was introduced into theater even more. I had multiple types of like ranges of just experience, from different types of like going over my friends' houses and seeing their way of like living, their parents, and like meeting them and going to like parties and discovering like music. I feel like Jersey really just prepared me for the legacy that I was going to want to leave behind, which is to connect to multiple core audiences around the world.
And I mean, that's so interesting because I actually didn't know that about you. I didn't know you moved or like right before going into high school because we met in high school. So I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And you mentioned being able to really gain this core friend group. Was there anything in particular that allowed you to find your people in an easier way, or do you think it was challenging?
I mean, yeah, I have to give it all praises to theater, literally all praises to theater, because yeah, that was where where I really established my limitlessness, if that makes sense. I was very able to, while embodying a character, also allow for a deeper connection that existed in the character, but also outside of it, if that makes sense. It was like we're allowing ourselves to shed our own skin to be something else, but in the shedding of our skin, it makes us more of ourselves. It's like, oh, we're able to take on these different things and like adopt these different natures in ourselves that wouldn't be possible had we not seen it in a character we were adapting or, portraying. So I feel like that was a big thing for me. And even such things as like backstage happenings, and things happening, backstage happenings, and things happening in like the certain setting, black box. So I think those experiences really draws you together, as a cohesive bunch, to just create something together. That was the task. Like, you can't do it without the other person. Like our teacher always said, acting, or one of the little sayings in acting is reacting, and you need another being to react to something. So it just made us aware and dependent, but in a good way, of our strengths and our weaknesses.
Wow. I mean, that's so interesting because even in the work that I do as a social worker, I am always bringing theater or the arts into it, right? Like this, all the like elements of ensemble building are, I feel like they're fundamental in everything. Honestly, I tell people all the time, like being able to work with other people, being able to juggle multiple things. I remember in high school, like the theater teachers would say something along the lines of like actors or theater students are one of the most like versatile or are able to like multitask better than other
Right.
people. And even till this day, I think about it. I'm like, yeah, like you have to juggle so many different things, and that really is the world of an adult, like having to juggle different things. So keeping that in mind, I want to ask you about adulthood. How has adulting been? What did you do after high school? Um, what were some of your goals or dreams, and how did everything come about?
After high school, I went to Bergen, and that's where I further established my acting ability. That's also where I happened to establish a lot of my connections that have taken me far in Atlanta. One of my friends, one of my good friends, Kevin, we established our bond at Bergen. We had known each other prior to Bergen, but we didn't really connect. And then when we both went to Bergen, it was a great, it was like a long lost friend. Like, we would do shows, we would go see shows together. We were in shows together. And then just established that connection deeper. In terms of continuing in Bergen, I said I went, but continuing and finishing it was another story, just given life experience and things that, impede in the process.
I mean, you said certain things that impede. What exactly did you mean? Like, what things came up that were affecting you during that time?
Like I said, given that a big part of my understanding of myself has come through the reflection of other people, it was just, I don't think I was ever truly put in a position to, I don't want to say feel worthy of finishing anything, but just in the course of me always moving and, always feeling like things were half finished, like, what I mean? I was never able to really establish that. So it was like once the threshold of adulthood was put into play, it was like, okay, cool, you could go to school, but you also got to work. And that, for me, it was always a struggle because like I couldn't really, I hadn't developed the skill to multitask, multitask in a good way past high school. And that's strange, like how you said before, that theater kids should be the most versatile. But outside of high school, it gets a bit more tougher to maintain. It was very difficult trying to continue an educational pursuit. But past that, I had worked, I worked very closely in my writing and the endeavors of my writing with one of my really good friends, Marcos, and we kind of developed like a good or like a really good rapport in terms of making music and developing a sound for ourselves. So that's like the closest I've been to really establishing myself as a lyric writer, because that was really one interest that took a hold of me with musical theater, because I was like, oh, you can like I always knew I could express myself in ways of writing, because that's where I went to naturally, going through so many things and not being able to express them, because sometimes in those situations when you're forced to move against your will, it's also like a silent thing, like that thing where it's like, were you silent or silenced?
I agree with what you're saying. I think something really important to note is that you said you didn't really know what you wanted, right? Because of all this moving and relocating and like having to, in a way, rediscover yourself or like
Right.
and find like your people and things like that. Like, I feel like it sounds like you were kind of just moving with things, like trying to keep up.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that just seemed like a necessary next step in trying to keep up, was the whole thing of like going through the college experience. Now that I'm outside of it, I really do appreciate the aspect of, the just the academics of it all. I really do love that. And, I had thoughts of like going back for certain things of like philosophy and things of that nature. But it was never a thought that was like, oh, I did it. I'm doing it for my best interest. It was a very much like a rat race game where it's like, oh, it's just logical that that's the next thing I do without actually taking account of my own personal existence or circumstance. And then after not finishing my associates, consistently worked until like around the time that me and my family, we have lived in like the last house we lived in Jersey, because even in Jersey we have lived like 5 different places in Jersey. And the last place we lived on the west side, because we were renting there, and the landlord had told us that we had, she was going to sell it. So we had gone through the process of trying to find a place, multiple application fees and whatnot. And eventually my cousin's aunt had offered like for a townhouse here in Georgia. And so they just packed up and they were gone. Like all my family was my mother, my aunt, my brother, my cousin, and my sister. And they had all packed up and just left to Georgia. And I had stayed behind because I was just like, oh, I know, like, this is what I know. Like, I form relationships here, bonds here, multiple, just like, I'm deep rooted in here. This is my root. And that's not to say that, like, of course you should branch off and fly to new heights, of course. But when you have been put in a position as I have to always be on the go, you just want some, just, for like a minute, And granted, I was blessed to go through all through high school without moving from Jersey and going through that process. But still, it was still home to me in a way that like, I didn't want to do it. Like, I was like, this is not my ideal situation. So I stayed behind. And when I did, my aunt had a friend of her old job, and I had stayed with him for like a month in like it was like a little sub basement thing. And I stayed for like a month, and just going through that on my own for the first time, dealing with the conditions of the sub basement and what I was paying to stay there, and all those multiple things had really gotten the worst of me. And that was also around the same time, within that month I had gotten COVID, and it was really, really bad. So like, I was like on deathbed. Like it was a really rough time for me. So I had just concluded after the month, I was like, okay, I can't do this. Like, I'm just gonna, go out to Georgia, see what that's talking about.
I can imagine like how scary that was, right? Like you were with your entire family, you had friends, you had the sense of belonging, right? And then it all kind of shifted, and now you're alone, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna try and do this because I don't want to leave. I want to stay here, and I want to see what comes next. And then managing all these things that adults have to manage in terms of like rent, working, food, cleanliness, all these different
transportation,
transportation, as well as now you get COVID and need to be taken care of.
Right.
So I mean, did you have any support systems through that injury?
No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I had all my friends from theater had immensely supported me. All the people that I knew from high school, we're still very close. So they supported me through it. My cousin, he supported me through a lot of it because he stayed in Jersey as well. So that really, really helped me.
So you get COVID and you decide to go to Georgia. What happened once you got to Georgia?
Now, once I got to Georgia, it was a switch. I was back to the living condition of like no space. So it was never really much space for me to express myself in like a freeing way. or like even get like a moment of like respite because I was always surrounded by people. It was like regressive. It was very regressive for me because I felt myself having to shrink and having to like, stifle my own, creative ways or just like it was just very stifling for me. Um, but I did the adult thing and got a job, tried to support myself the best way I could. But after 3 months, maybe 3 months, my friend Kevin was going on vacation to Louisiana, and he was like, "Oh, like I would love for you to come, yeah, yada yada." And I was like, "Okay, that's fine." So we went to Louisiana, and then even before we went to Louisiana, he had a place in New York, and I was telling him how like I can't do this, like this is so stifling, I'm over it. And he was like, "You can come live with me in New York." And I was like, for real. And given, and not to say that it was the same situation, it was another thing for me. And it's so weird why coming to that realization talking to you, because so many people have always like a lot of my friends have usually are the ones that like see me in that way, have always been like, oh, like you need to take up your space, like live in your space. I've always been told that like multiple times, like take up your space, live in your space. And I think that's always been a difficult thing for me, given the situations that I keep landing in where it's like, oh, it's not, there's no space. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I can understand if it was something that like you were doing personally because you feel like, out of fear, but it's never that. It's like, this is just a built up reality, even though it's not here, it is a built up reality where I have to shrink myself to be accommodating or accepting of other people.
I mean, when living with family, a lot of times that's the caveat, right? Like you get this sense of unconditional support, but in a way it's not unconditional because there are things that are conditions, like you said, right? You have to kind of like minimize yourself, have to keep in mind, okay, I have to respect everyone, so I can't always just speak my mind. I can't
Right. Right.
really be who I want to be. I have to kind of like be that in the best way I can, but also keep it in mind the environment I'm in. So hearing you say that, I mean, I definitely resonate with that. And I just wanted to ask you, despite those feelings of feeling like you were going backwards in a way, how did it feel to be back with your family? Because again, you were on your own and then you left to be with them, and now you're with them. You don't have this freedom that you had before, but in a way
Right.
you have this support system.
It's a strange feeling because I think people have cyclical natures that force them to deal with things that they couldn't otherwise. It was a place of, how do I break out of like the mold? Because when people say it all starts from home, definitely forced me to confront those insecurities and those things that were thrust upon me at childhood or even like adolescence, to wake up and be like, okay, this is something that makes you uncomfortable. It's something that you have to, it's not something that you necessarily have to run from, because that was the legacy that was there before me. It was always running and pushing things aside out of convenience, and I'm like, okay, well, this is clearly something that's been calling, because if I can't face this, there's always going to be some inner child wound that's not allowing me to push forward or push past a certain limit, because I'm going to be like, oh, you know, um, shrinking back into old habits just because I haven't confronted them. So I think it's not easier. I wouldn't say easier by any means, but I can handle it better now that I've faced it like a second round.
And in terms of like friends, because you talked about having a really strong friend group in New Jersey who were actually
Mhm.
supportive of you and like really understood who you were and were there for you. And then you moved to Georgia, and you mentioned some friends in Georgia, but I just wanted to get a sense of how you built those friendships and just how supportive they are?
Initially, my friend Kevin from Bergen, he would be there in case I needed to get out. I was like, I got to get out. You know, we would go, like I said, we would go see shows. We would just go out, maybe have a nice, like, you know, night on the town or whatever. So that really helped me. And my friend Michelle, who was also, she's a good friend from high school. She moved down here, and that was another support system where I was able to breathe again and really feel like I could express myself in a way that like helped me heal. But just them being there and helping me establish a better understanding of what was actually going on in the city of Atlanta and Georgia, you know, surrounding towns. If I was like, well, there's no excuse for me now, because like now I've been shown and now I've actually taken the plunge to do it, even if it was with the help of friends. I did it.
Your friends were like that push for you in terms of, you know, like getting acclimated, doing things like you had, like them being there for you allowed you to really be yourself and in a way allow yourself to just try, even if it meant failing and things. So, I mean, and you said yes. So when I said that, have you had conversations with your friends about like the way that you view them in terms of how they support you or how you support them?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially with my friend Kevin. I thank him multiple times because I'm like, wow, like just the different experiences we have in the city. I'm just like, I feel like I'm thanking him all the time. Like, he is one of the examples to take that plunge, even if it's not something that you feel is motivated from you, you know, because sometimes you have to go through those phases where it's like, this might not be my motivation or my inspiration, you know, it might be something that's like instilled in me, but I have to go through it to see the other side of it. Or just like, you just have to go through it to, even if you don't see the other side, it's like, there's something still worth experiencing and something still worth value in those experiences where you might not be 100% yourself or you feel like you've lost yourself, you know, because it's like, there's those certain things that see you, even if you feel lost. And it's like, well, like, I'll see you on the other side.
It reminds me of the saying that people say of like, you're representative of the 5 people you hang out most with. So hearing you say that, it's like, yeah, at times, you know, there are things I want to do and I don't want to do. But when you're with people that have a good vibe, that make you feel safe, that make you feel seen, right? You're doing things sometimes and you don't even know why you're doing them. It just happens because you're in a space where you can do things or try or like dip your toes into different things.
Going back into the thing of how you're saying like the representation, it's always so weird to me. I feel like I have like imposter syndrome sometimes because like I'm good for going like, sometimes I'll go like radio silent and like, you know, my friends will be like, where are you? Where are you? Where are you? And like, I'm just going through something. I'm like, girl, I'm trying to figure it out this week. Like, it's like, oh, okay, that was last week too, but it's fine. But I just feel like imposter syndrome because my friends are really great friends. And I'm just like, y'all are unreal. Like, there's no way I'm getting this much support. And it's like, it feels like, it really does feel like imposter syndrome.
We're mentioning about your friend Kevin, and when you mentioned how you thank him, like in my mind, I thought of like when I do that to friends or when friends do that to me, and my response is always like, you don't have to thank me. Like you're thanking me for like things that you shouldn't. I was just curious, like, is that something that happens to you with your friends?
No, I mean, that's his same reaction. Like, he's like, you know, he's just definitely like off of it. Like, he's just like, you don't have to. And that is strange that you say that, because it's like, it's, I don't know. I don't really know, because it's hard to see that sometimes things aren't transactional. You know, it's very hard to see that. So sometimes when you have that thing where it's just pure intent and kinship, it's just like, I want you to know that like I owe a lot of things to you. Like, you know what I mean? Just in terms of like not even just money or monetary value, but hope, you know, freedom, you know, expression, you know.
I mean, I will go as far as to say that those are really the friendships that stay with you, like where you can have those deep conversations in terms of like, thank you, or this, and they respond like, no, you don't have to thank me. And then you're like, but no, really, I have to thank you. Like, this, like being honest. I mean, I talked to a really close friend of mine, and she said our relationship has lasted as long as it has because we're honest in terms of like, when we're mad, we say we're mad and why we're mad. If we're happy, we'll do the same. It's not really just keeping it on one side, like making sure it works. It's like, no, we're human. We have all these different emotions that we have to share with those people who spend the most time with us so that, we can let it out. Like you said, right? Especially if you're in an environment where you feel like you can't truly let loose or be yourself without thinking of everything you're doing like in a robotic manner.
Right. Yeah. And at first that used to like, I don't want to say, it just used to scare me as like a person, because I always used to identify friendship with that convenience. I used to be like, okay, like don't ruffle the feathers, like it's your friend, like if they're wrong, like they'll figure it out, like it's fine, like don't try to like do all that, because then they'll be mad at you and they won't talk to you and yada yada yada. And then as time went on, and you just like, and that's why I said I have to attribute that to Jersey, because in Jersey they just kind of say what it is. It's no playing. It's no time to cut corners. It just is what it is. And so I just, that adopting that nature really helped me to just confront things in myself that I didn't like. Certain shadows that we all possess. That really helped me to be like, oh, okay, like it's because I can accept myself that I am the way I am, and that's what a lot of my friends in Jersey showed me. It's not such thing as like confrontation, or no one's trying to be like an adversary for you. It's just like you have to be willing to see people at their best and their worst, just like they have to do it themselves and accept it and love it, because like that's what makes a friend. That's what makes a complete human being.
I just want to thank you, Quincy, just for sharing all these things with me and for being here today. So that was really our last question. I just wanted to ask you before I let you go, though, is there anything that you want to tell those listening about friendship, or any advice on moving, or if you have to like relocate and finding like a support system, how to go about it?
Well, first, I want to thank you for even giving me this space, because like it really, I mean, honestly, just, I think even talking through this kind of exposed the way that I need these conversations. I need these types of like revelations between people through human experience and resonation. I can't get to the other side without the other person. So I just want to tell people out there that do not be afraid to take those leaps. Sometimes those instinctual nudges and those certain patterns, they might repeat themselves, but you cannot be afraid to dive deep into it, because that's really what's going to help you overcome it in the long run. And certain spaces like these, like the service provider, definitely allow for that exorcism of, the woe of like not being able to express yourself, and the woe of just not feeling, of being discontent in your own body. So I feel like, do not be afraid of yourself, and don't be afraid to heal yourself with the help of other people, because in the long run, we're going through this, we're in this together, we're playing the long game, and it involves each one of us, taking the next step for the person behind us. So
Inspiring words, Quincy. Thank you again for being here. And I also just want to say that it takes a village. And sometimes that village looks differently in terms of where you are, what you need. But know that your village is out there. Whether that's friends, family, people in a specific group, you'll find them. But You have to be vulnerable enough to put yourself in those spaces in order to be fortunate enough to find them. So I will see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Service Provider Podcast. I am your host, Frederick Marte, and I just want to say, have a great day. Please, please, please follow me on Instagram to connect at Frederick Talks. And you can listen to the podcast on Spotify as well as Apple Podcasts.